This is Bryce Burge, host of Your Soccer Passport. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten here on Public House Media. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you are done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Rewritten, where we will talk about you having limitless potential and can rewrite your story at any time. No matter your background, your past, or current situation, you can have the type of life you crave. A new show comes out every single Monday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Rewritten. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to Beauties and Headcanons, where we're nerdy, and you probably are too. I'm Emily, and I'm here today with Lindsay, and we're here to talk nerdy to you about a couple of nerdy movie releases from last month. In the wake of Aquaman, there were a lot of other movies that came out, including Mary Poppins Returns and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that drew in fans from those respective fandoms as well. And Lindsay and I each saw a different movie, so we're going to discuss our thoughts on those. So Lindsay is going to talk about Mary Poppins.
Yeah, so I thought it was really interesting, especially with this movie, because I had the opportunity to decide which movie we were going to go see. So, of course, I went and saw Mary Poppins with my daughter, but I definitely gave her the option to go see Spider-Verse. And at the time, we were also thinking about seeing Aquaman. And we sat there. We were trying to figure out which one we could make it to and which one was going to have two spots next to each other, because I definitely didn't want to sit on the other side of the theater for my 11-year-old.
Oh, yeah.
But we ended up finding two seats to go see Mary Poppins that day, so that's what we went and did. And it was the start of the new year, and it was a really fun experience. Aurelia had seen Mary Poppins, when the original, at some point in time. And, I usually get them sort of mixed up together with who was the main person in them. Obviously, there's Mary Poppins, but Emily, have you ever seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks?
No, I haven't.
No?
Sorry.
Well, there were these movies that, you watched when they came on the Disney Channel, and
oh, sure.
You watched them, but some of us really had an affinity for these movies and some of us didn't. And of course, I loved Mary Poppins. I knew all the words to all the songs. And you and Erica actually, sometime in 2017, I think August of 2017, I can't believe it's already been over
a year
goodness.
And a half. It's been like a year and a half.
It's been, I think it was your second episode where you guys talked about Mary Poppins and some theories about Mary Poppins' origin and what she really is. And it's very interesting in Mary Poppins Returns. They make a lot of emphasis on the fact that she hasn't aged.
Yeah.
And of course, a spoiler alert for everybody who hasn't seen Mary Poppins yet. I really don't think you should be listening to this episode if you haven't seen Spider-Verse or Mary Poppins.
Very, very good point. There will be spoilers.
Yes, so I mean, spoilers as soon as now. Obviously, Mary Poppins doesn't age. They make a lot of points about that. There's actually a sequence where somebody mentions that she looks the same, or she hasn't aged, or how old are you, Mary Poppins? And she goes, oh, how rude! You couldn't possibly ask a woman her age. Which I thought was wonderful because, of course, it's
a very appropriate Mary Poppins phrase to say. Yes,
exactly. But she was definitely someone who doesn't change in age or stature from the first movie to the second movie, and obviously these other characters have. So we see Mr. Dawes. He is now Mr. Dawes in charge of the bank, so he has turned from junior to basically the senior's age. And the Bankses have aged as well, so they are now parental age. So Michael now has two children, and she comes into their lives. And it's almost as though Michael has sort of forgotten all of the whimsical, wonderful things that Mary Poppins was able to have happen to them when she was their nanny.
Okay.
And at the end, they do remember that she was this fantastic person, that these things did really happen. And the kids are actually very practical as well. In the beginning of the movie, they are very practical. They have had to grow up pretty fast because they've lost the matriarch of their family, and
Oh.
it's very sad. But they're very capable children, and they don't think that they need a nanny. They definitely don't need Mary Poppins. And in classic Mary Poppins style, she comes in on a wind. She comes in with her umbrella and her carpet bag, and the umbrella is still talking. And if I remember correctly, still looks pretty accurate to what we remember from our childhood. And she talks to it, and she like tells it to stop talking because one of the adults hears it or something like that. Or she's Emily Blunt really does a very good job keeping the illusion alive. It's really visually appealing to see. And it's also very fun to theorize as to how these characters interconnect. I didn't know that Lin-Manuel Miranda, who plays Jack in Mary Poppins Returns, was such a famous man. And
Yeah,
I
he's a
how,
big name right now.
right, I don't know how I missed it because I love musicals. I would take Aurelia to every single one I possibly could, but I haven't managed to see Hamilton. I haven't managed to really, I guess, keep up on Broadway and the Tony Awards and things like that. So shame on me for that. But it doesn't look like he actually wrote anything in this.
Oh, okay, to clarify, there's new songs in this Mary Poppins. Do they like echo any of the old songs at all?
No, so they do have the same kind of whimsical feel to them, and I
Okay.
don't want to be disappointed in that because I did feel like they definitely did their very best to hold their own. There is no reprise of Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. There
Mm.
is no song. I mean, there is a song that I would say they're really trying to be Spoonful of Sugary, but it's definitely not Spoonful of Sugar, and it's definitely not a Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. They have
Okay.
other songs, and they are still very appealing to the ear, but I wouldn't. They're definitely not reprises or revisits of that. She doesn't sing those same songs, and I do kind of feel like that should have. That's how it should be. You wouldn't want it to be Julie Andrews and have those songs be sung by someone who wasn't you.
That's right. That's kind of first of all, it would be like you can't duplicate Julie Andrews.
Yes.
And so everybody who's going expecting to hear somebody that sounds just like her is not going to be happy with it. And then at the same time, like you're saying, like if you're Julie Andrews and somebody's trying to, you know, repeat what you've done.
It wouldn't really have been right by her, and it wouldn't have
Yeah,
been right to tell the actress who was going to play Mary Poppins, "Hey, we need you to do your very best to sound like this
right.
amazing woman who was
She
essentially perfect for this role." Walt Disney waited through her
Yes.
pregnancy in order to
Yes.
cast her and have her
Which
in
is
film.
amazing. Oh, I love that story.
So I wouldn't want that to happen, and I wouldn't want to put another actress in that situation either. So I can appreciate that they didn't do that, that they didn't have her even say supercalifragilistic. Like I'm just glad that that wasn't addressed, but they definitely did stay true to the Mary Poppins age and stature, the practically perfect in every way. All of those things were definitely still true to the character. So I was appreciative of that. I do feel like the songs that they do have were still very appealing to the ear, but I had a little bit of problems with the lyrics. I am someone who listens to music and listens to the lyrics and pieces apart the lyrics. And, in middle school and high school, when you had to write those essays about what this song means, that's me.
Oh boy.
I do that every song ever.
Gotcha.
So I feel like some of these songs were just a little too fantastical to really make a whole lot of sense for what I needed them to make sense about and for. Um, Now the choreography, there is definitely a song where Lin Manuel Miranda leads the Lamplighters, and so originally there was chimney sweeps, now there's Lamplighters, and there's a lot of lines with the guys dancing, and again it was an ensemble of men dancing around the lamps, and it was so visually appealing. I was just looking at the lines with the lampposts and their knees bent and their bodies
Uh,
swinging off the lights. It was very cool to see.
That's awesome. And that's one of my favorite parts of the original was
Right.
the chimney sweep song.
Hmm.
Like I loved it. I loved their tap dancing and the whole song itself and all the choreography. It was just fantastic.
Right. It's really cool to see an ensemble of men dancing in unison. And again, the lines, they were like all skinny, tall men. So the lines, when you get that
You get
together,
them all, yeah.
yeah, it's very visually astounding.
Nice.
I do a lot of watching movies or watching musicals and trying to see what they would look like on the opposite medium. So, you know,
Oh,
if
interesting.
this movie were to go on stage, how that would look with a bunch of people and a bunch of lamps and a bunch of dancing, and
Oh yeah.
it would be so cool.
That I bet that would be super cool.
Yeah. So I definitely loved that they were able to, all those parts of Mary Poppins that you really wanted to make sure that they hit in their own way, which made it a very cool sequel to the Mary
Yeah.
Poppins that we know and love.
I think that's something I can appreciate about it because, like, I wouldn't want it to just be an exact copy of the original because then it feels like they just cheated,
Right.
and they didn't think of anything original for themselves. So, like, on the one hand, I appreciate that they kind of echoed the like tradesman
Hmm.
thing, but I'm like, oh, I love that they did something like a cool choreographed man dance kind of deal. Um, although it would have been interesting and cool to see something sort of different too, but I don't know how they did it. So because I haven't seen
Right.
this one, so I'm interested to see what it's like.
Well, and it's funny too because I remember telling a little story where I am convinced that I always learn about something in passing that I'll need to know about later.
Yes,
And
you told me that before. Uh-huh.
for this particular movie, Aurelia was talking to me during it, and the lamplighters, while they were doing their thing, she looks at me and she says, "That was one of the few steady jobs in that time." And I looked at her and I was like, "Sure,
Okay.
makes sense." And I was like, "Okay," because I always want to know what she thinks she knows. So
Right.
I asked her, "Well, what's the other steady job then?" And she said, "Oh, people who would knock on the doors and wake people up so that they could get ready for work because they didn't have alarm clocks." And I looked at her like she was nuts, of course, because I had never heard her saying something about how they never got any sleep because they always had to be up so that they could light the lamps or knock on the doors. And I thought, okay, sure, yeah, you're 11, you know stuff like this. But then, literally within the same week, my weekly calendar that I do a day by day had a little trivia thing, and it was talking about the people in London who would knock on doors. And I was like, oh, I guess she was right. This really is a thing. But can you imagine if they made another Mary Poppins
That's
movie and
funny.
the sequence was about people knocking on doors?
They'd all go and like choreographed people dancing between all the different doors. Like,
Right, but then all the because we went from chimney sweeping and tap dancing to whatever kind of dancing you would call these lamplighters did, to like some kind of clogging beat type thing with the
yeah,
knocking. I mean, I could see it happening.
I could see it. Yeah,
But then, of course, you would want, I don't know, females to have some kind of job. And
yeah,
I did like how the costumes were in this film because
yeah.
they seemed very true to form.
What time period is this? I know the Banks children have grown up, so it would have been 1930s sometime because in 1910 was the first one, right?
Yeah, I'd want to say that I mean, don't quote me on this. I feel like I should really look it up. But I feel like they were very, maybe 1950s, 1960s
Okay, that could
ish.
be. That could be. Yeah, I guess yeah, 30s would be a little early because they'd be in their 20s or so. Yeah, so yeah, it could be like the 40s or 50s or 60s. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not even really sure, to be honest. I do know, obviously, Mary Poppins doesn't change. Actually, you know what? It says Mary Poppins Returns was set in the 1930s Depression era London.
Oh,
So that means that the original Mary Poppins must have been late 1800s
well, it says
or early 1900s.
Mr. Banks's song, he says at the beginning, he's like, it's nice to be an Englishman in 1910
Oh,
is one of
there
his
you
lines
go.
in the song. It's like the one specific line that I remember from one of the side characters. That's one that I remember from his song. I don't know why.
Oh, then you could have just said that and we would have had it fine. Because 1930s could, even be mid to late 1930s. And I'd
Yeah.
say that my is, his kids are about 8 to 9 years old at the oldest. So he's probably
Okay.
about 38 or so. That makes about sense,
Yeah, that
doesn't
would
it?
work.
Yeah, so I really did love the costumes, 1930s. Aurelia kept telling me about how women wouldn't wear dresses or would only wear dresses. They wouldn't wear bloomers yet. They wouldn't wear
Oh,
pantaloons. They would wear just dresses. And I thought that was really interesting because one of the main characters, Michael's
Oh, Michael's wife or Michael's
no, Michael's
Oh,
sister
sister.
wears pants.
Oh, and
Hmm.
that would be very scandalous
Yes,
at that
yep.
time.
She's doing a lot of women's rights type
Yeah.
of
Well,
stuff.
her mom was. She was a
Mhm.
suffragette.
Right.
So, yeah. So I
Yeah,
could
so
definitely
she's
see
definitely
that.
still doing that, which is really cool. She does sort of have a little bit of a like a like a flirtation throughout a lot of the movie with Jack, which I thought was so cute.
Interesting.
And she really denies it. She keeps saying, "Oh no, Jack's just a friend."
Right,
And
right.
then near the very end sequences, they have a little bit where they are obviously into each other. So it was really cute.
Aw.
And Meryl Streep is in this movie. She's lovely and dolled up, but I think I can honestly say I didn't really need her in this movie.
Okay.
She's in everything, and I love her in everything. But this one, I really had a hard time with. I felt
Hmm.
like it was hard to take her seriously as an actress in this role. So,
Interesting. I don't know.
one of the really cool things that I thought was interesting was that Mary Poppins talks about how she's going to stay as long as until the door opens.
Oh,
Um,
instead of until the wind changes like the last one, till
yes.
the door opens. That is interesting.
And the wind does change, which makes the door open. But there's
Ah,
there's an awful lot of insinuation that she knows exactly what she's doing, what she needs to be doing, and what's going to happen.
yeah.
So in the original, where the wind changing is sort of a metaphor for
Realizing what he needs to fix or whatever.
like kind of
Yeah.
realizing what his children need
Yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
not a stern hand, but a loving father.
Right.
And in this one, the family's going through a lot of transition where they lost the mother, and the kids really need to just be kids, but they lose the house and they end up getting back into the house, and that's kind of when the door opens and Mary Poppins goes. But it's again, a metaphor for the family.
Getting on their feet again, kind of.
Yeah, definitely being whole
Okay.
again.
Okay. Yeah.
The door open, the house being open to them again is definitely a signal that they're still a family. There's a really beautiful segment where the kids are very wise beyond their years, and they hear this from Mary Poppins. Of course, they take it to heart, and it has a lot to do with the mother still being with them, because no one's ever really gone from your life. You just can't see them anymore. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna get
Aw.
myself teared up in this, but it
That's
was a beautiful
yeah. That
way
sounds
to
really
emphasize
sweet.
that
Aw.
your family's never broken because of something like this happening, but instead just a little different. So
Yeah.
it was a very beautiful moral,
Yeah.
a beautiful mo in the end, to really show that Mary Poppins kind of um, glues them back together
Mhm.
the way that they need to be glued back together.
That's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think I could
You
write
did
an
her
essay.
job. Well, you've spoken one, essentially.
Well, so let's
Aw.
shut the door
Well,
on Mary Poppins and
okay.
talk a little bit about the Spider-Verse.
Sure, let's go into the Spider-Verse here. So I first time I saw the trailer for this one, I was really confused. I'm like, really? Another Spider-Man movie? Okay.
I
Um,
legit thought it was like a kids movie. I
well,
thought it was
yeah,
going to be something for kids.
it is rated PG, so it's definitely
Okay.
kid friendly, but there's also some dark moments and some like violence danger sort of stuff. So like I probably
Hmm.
wouldn't let my 4-year-old see it, but it'd be totally fine for like 7 and up or maybe like 6 and up. I don't know, something like that.
Sure.
Um, like school age kids would be down for it. Um, and the graphics, the way they did the animation, and this is so super cool. It's animated, but it's animated like a living comic book. So like they even have, you know how there's that artist who does comic book looking art. They have that on most of their faces. To show definition and shading and that sort of thing. That's how they
Oh,
do the three-dimensional effects. It's so cool. It's like so visually appealing. And not only that, but so there's in the plot line, again, spoiler alert, I'm gonna let loose here. So if anybody hasn't seen Spider-Verse and doesn't want spoilers, just stop now and go watch the movie.
right.
Because I'm gonna let loose on some spoilers here. Um, so the big bad guy's Kingpin, and he is trying to open a portal into another dimension to bring back his wife and son who got killed by some happenstance with Spider-Man, I think. And so that's what they're trying to do. Doc Ock is a woman, which is really cool to see. Um, and she is helping him figure out this crazy dimensional machine that opens up the universe to all these multiple dimensions. And one time it gets at the beginning, it gets turned on, and the actual Spider-Man's get the actual Spider-Man in that universe gets like held inside the beam of the dimension splitter thing, and so by doing that causes all of these other spider people to be drawn into the real dimension, or the one that we started out in. Okay. um
Okay.
the original kid that we start with in the movie, his name is Miles Morales. He's a black Hispanic kid. His dad's a black cop in New York and his mom is a Hispanic nurse. And so he got into this really fancy school. So he just transferred to this like elite boarding school where he lives at school during the week, goes home on the weekends. Really isn't feeling it, but he's really smart. And he passed the test to get in. He got chosen on the lottery, so he's in there like on a free ride, basically. And so he goes to this school, but he's hating it. So he goes to visit his uncle, who didn't exactly choose a prosperous life, but he chose a life that he chose, and he looks up to his uncle. And so to let off some steam one night, he goes over to visit his uncle and hang out. And his Miles's thing that he does is his like kind of stress reliever is he draws graffiti in like a notebook of his, and his uncle takes him underground in the subways to go put up this graffiti in a really hidden corner where nobody else is ever going to find it again. But you know, he knows where it is, where to find it. So he goes and sprays his graffiti on the wall. And this is the part where after he's done doing his graffiti, he gets like a spider crawls up his leg. And there's this dramatic sequence of like showing where the spider's going and that it's from this specific facility. So you can tell that it's not a normal spider. And he gets bit by it, doesn't think much of it until he gets back to his dorm room and he's like freaking out. He feels really weird. He grew like 4 inches, so his pants are too small, and he's already not liked at school because he's super dorky, and his dad forced him to say "I love you" when he got dropped off in the squad car. So he's like super awkward about it. He bumps into this girl who he like kind of hit it off with the day before, and she's new at the school too, but he's like sweating profusely. And then she gets super awkward about it, and come to find out she's Spider Gwen.
Okay.
So she was drawn from another dimension 2 weeks into the past, or like a week into the past, before the spider thing happened. And so he met her, and then Miles like somehow went and found Spider-Man doing something at this facility, and then he like followed Spider-Man around because he like realized he started to have like spider senses, and like he kept like trying to grab stuff and it would get stuck on his fingers and he couldn't figure out how to like control himself. Or he like met Spider-Man, and when they met face to face, they had this like those like zigzag exclamation point, not really exclamation point, like alert things around their heads, like in comic books do when they like notice something important. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that was them noticing that both of them had spidey senses, and they both, and so he's like, "You're like me. What? I thought there was only one." And so, the real Spider-Man realizes that Miles suddenly has Spidey powers. And so he's like, "All right, kid, let me finish up what I'm doing here. I don't want you to get hurt, but I can show you how to do this. I can help you. And, maybe you can actually use your powers for some good." And so Spider-Man goes off and tries to save the day and ends up not saving the day, and Kingpin like smashes him and he dies. So, yeah. But that's not all.
Okay.
After the Spider-Man is dead and buried, this is Peter Parker, regular Peter Parker.
Hmm.
He was voiced by Chris Pine. That one was. Miles goes to visit Peter Parker's grave after trying to like help, and if he didn't do a good job of it. And then um, he looks around the graveyard and sees this like creepy figure, so he like lashes out, and turns out he has like electricity
Oh,
abilities, but at the same time this guy shoots some spider webs at him. Turns out it's Peter B. Parker from The Amazing Spider-Man, voiced by Jake, the guy Nick from New Girl. It's that guy. Jake Johnson is his name. So he's Peter B. Parker from The Amazing Spider-Man. And this guy's like washed up. He was Spider-Man for 22 years, and then he got divorced from MJ, and he had this whole horrible life, and he really doesn't make much of himself and thinks really poorly of himself. But in the end, he's still Spider-Man, so I guess he's still got to save the day kind of thing. But he's not really feeling this kid thing. Anyways, kind of long story short here is like we discover that there's a whole bunch of other spider people or spider beings that come. There's Spider-Man Noir, voiced by Nicolas Cage, who shows up. He's like this really dark, aloof, like sees the dark side of everything kind of Spider-Man. There is Penny Parker, who is this Japanese anime girl who uses her spider in a fancy robot that is a spider robot guy. So she like sits in this mech robot and like controls it, and that's how she's Spider Girl. I don't know. And
okay.
all right, and then there's Spider Gwen, who is awesome. She is voiced by Haley Steinfeld, who is the girl that's in Bumblebee. She's like the main girl from the Bumblebee movie that just came out. So
Okay.
that's Spider Gwen, and I really like Spider Gwen in this. She's super cool. So highly recommend her. And then that's not all. There's also Spider Ham, a literal pig in a
Oh,
Spider-Man suit that has spider powers. Like, I didn't know that was a thing, but apparently it's an actual thing. Like, there's an actual comic series about Spider-Ham. I didn't know this.
and it has nothing to do with Homer Simpson and Spider Pig,
No,
right?
nothing. It's actually
Is it
Spider-Ham.
Homer Simpson or is it Peter Griffin? I can't even remember.
It was Simpsons. Definitely
Okay.
Simpsons.
So you know what I'm talking about,
But
Spider
yes,
Pig, Spider
yes, too,
Pig,
yeah, this big.
whatever.
It was in
Okay.
the Simpsons movie, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so this Spider Ham is voiced by John Mulaney. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a comedian. Um,
Actually, you know what? It's familiar. I bet if I
yeah,
heard the voice, I would recognize
you
it.
probably would. And speaking of John Mulaney, the only skit that I'm familiar with him from is the one called The Salt and Pepper Diner. And if you, I'll give a brief rundown of it, but you should definitely check it out because it's hilarious. Just find it on like YouTube or something. Salt and Pepper Diner by John Mulaney. So when he was a kid, he grew up in like the Chicago suburb area or downtown. I don't know, somewhere around Chicago. And there was this diner called the Salt and Pepper Diner where you could pick songs in the jukebox, for I forget how much it was. But one day he and his friend decided to be ridiculous and play What's New Pussycat a bajillion times in a row, but with one, it's not unusual, mixed into the middle. And so it was the whole sketches about like, how he's describing him and his friend, and they're watching everybody in the restaurant like listening to this song, and they're like, "Oh, was that just a really long What's New Pussycat? I guess that song is a lot longer than I thought it was." No, oh yeah, it's just a long song with a dip in the middle. No, that was definitely What's New Pussycat 4 times in a row. And
Okay.
then, so the skit goes on. Somebody did that to my husband when he was streaming on Twitch once. He was playing Elder Scrolls Online, and you can song request, YouTube videos to go, to play while they're streaming. And so while he was streaming, it was two people that we're pretty familiar with. They song requested "What's New Pussycat," different videos every time, several times in a row, and this went on for like an hour and a half. And I'm like, really? So, anyways, it was hilarious. The side note there, but anyways, so I want to get back to so John Mulaney is the voice of Spider-Ham. Long side tangent, but definitely check out his skit Salt and Pepper Diner. It's hilarious. So back to the graphics though, it's really interesting because the original dimension, the original universe that we start off in is the one with Miles Morales and everybody there. Now, the further away we get from the original dimension, the animations become more and more cartoonish, finally ending with Spider-Ham looking like a total cartoon next to Miles, who looks like a regular kid.
Okay.
So it's really cool the way they kind of distinguished the dimensions that way. Like, even Spider-Man Noir looks more cartoony because he has this big cloak and this hat, because he looks like a private eye, but Spider-Man,
Sure.
if that
Yeah.
makes sense. And so like his cloak kind of ripples in the wind a little bit, but not much, and that sort of thing. So like it's really cool. But so the whole point of everything is like all of these spider beings are all mixed up in different dimensions, and their atoms are not stable in the wrong dimension. So the longer they stay there, if they stay there too long, they're gonna die.
Okay.
So they're trying to get all of these spider beings back to their regular dimensions, but also one person has to stay behind to turn off the machine, because otherwise all of the dimensions in the world are going to collapse and destroy the space-time continuum.
So wait. What's the machine?
The machine is the dimension splitter or something like that.
Oh.
It's the machine that Doc Ock is working on for Kingpin, so that Kingpin wants to get his wife and son
Right.
back. So Doc Ock has been working on this for him, and she's like, "All right, you can have as many wives and sons as you want back, but it's not going to be stable."
Right.
So she like warns him up front that it's not a perfect idea, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
Right. And of course Kingpin doesn't care.
Right, of course. He's just like, no, I want my wife and son back. That's it. And so he's like, just do it. Um, so eventually everything works out. They visit Aunt May at the original Peter Parker's house, the one that died, and she's like, wow, it took you guys long enough. Let me take you to his secret lair that he has all of this awesome tech in. It's super cool. There's a cool like reconciliation scene with Miles and his dad, because they were like on shaky ground because Miles stopped talking to his family for a while he was trying to figure out his Spider-Man thing. And eventually Miles does figure out his Spidey identity, because he ends up having to like be the one that stays behind in his dimension so that all of the other spider people can get back to their dimensions. And originally it was going to be the Amazing Spider-Man that was going to stay behind and let everybody else get back, and then he was just going to end up dying in Miles's dimension. He's like, no, I can't let that happen. You get to go home and you get to have the rest of your life. And so that was really cool to kind of see that Miles like fully like grew into who he is as Spider-Man, but everybody that was a spider person, a spider being, was still Spider-Man, but in their own unique ways.
Mm-hmm.
It was just really cool to see their personalities and their different take on what Spider-Man's mission is. So yeah, I just thought it was really cool how everybody had like a similar but slightly different take on with great power comes great responsibility, and all of their personalities really played into the way that they interpreted that. And so each spider being, I say spider being because a pig's not a human, so
Right.
I just want to clarify. Everybody that has those Spidey powers, they're being who they believe Spider-Man is.
Well, and what's really cool too is like if you had gotten, if any of these different people were given the spider sense or spider abilities at any given point in time, everyone would interpret it differently or
Yeah.
manifest it differently. So it's a really neat take on it. It's almost as though in each universe, the spider the spider ability would have latched onto someone, and
Uh-huh.
Peter Parker is the one that we know and love
Right.
with Stan Lee. But I also feel like that's kind of very one dimensional, and to have all these different ideas and all these different concepts is really neat. I don't know if you've been to a comic book store recently or not, but if you go into one, there are an awful lot of different options as to what you would read as far as Spider-Man, the Amazing Spider-Man, et cetera, et cetera. So,
I haven't looked recently, but I know that there's a ton. Well, and what's cool is in the movie, every new spider person that comes in, they say, "All right, let's start from the beginning." And so it tells their little backstory too. I'm like, "That's
so
awesome."
you get an origin story for each
Yeah.
individual one. That's really
Yeah. It's great. And so it was also cool because each person had a specific like life altering event that caused them to really take on the Spider-Man persona and do what they needed to do. And so each person had somebody like, for Peter Parker and Peter B. Parker, it was their Uncle Ben dying.
hmm
For Spider Gwen, Peter Parker died.
Okay.
So there was a bunch of different scenarios, and Miles had his moment too because his uncle died.
Okay.
And
So
so
everyone has a trauma that they
everybody
have
has a
to
trauma that they get over, and they realize that in order to use their powers, they have a responsibility to everyone else to use them appropriately, and that's kind of the moment that causes them to go all in.
take on the spider person. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, to go all in on it,
Yeah. And I can see how this would be hard though too for someone who's more of a like a Peter Parker purist. Someone who
Yes.
we talk about this a lot, where there's a sense of knowing the one true story, and all of the
Hmm.
offshoots are not the one true story. But this really brings into perspective the necessity for the other stories, which are also true. They're just true for someone else. Even when you're talking
Exactly.
about your individual truth is different than my individual truth. Um, so it makes it very human, not to
Yeah.
Stan Lee it, but it makes it.
But it is though, because well, and Stan Lee had a cameo in it too, as
Oh,
well.
Diddy.
He was an animated Stan Lee, and he was in a comic store, I suppose, selling all these Spider-Man costumes because after Spider-Man Peter Parker died, everyone wanted to buy the
Oh,
costume and
okay.
commemorate him. So he sold Miles his first spider suit. And he's like, "Hey, if it doesn't fit, can I bring it back?" And Stan Lee goes, "It always fits eventually." And then he had like the little tooth glint.
Yes.
Yeah, it was
Awesome.
great.
Oh my
It was
goodness.
great.
So originally we were going to make this episode be try to convince you to go see one movie or the other. And of course, we're all going to end up seeing all of our favorite fandoms and all of our favorite venues. I mean, I want to see Spider-Verse, and I'm sure you want to see Mary Poppins Returns.
I do.
Is there
I think
anything
we
else
were
we need to say about
successful.
this one?
I mean, I guess the Spider-Verse movie just kind of really brings home that everyone can be Spider-Man in their own way. And that's just kind of, they even like say it in the movie, like anyone can be Spider-Man. Everyone has that potential. Um,
It always fits eventually.
it's just, yeah, exactly. It always fits eventually. So, that that line by Stanley was a little bit serious in that moment because he was worried about the costume fitting. It was too small. So, he it wouldn't actually fit him. But the Spider-Man persona did fit him eventually, which is
Right.
really cool. So, and eventually he saved the day and everybody got back to their dimensions and all was well. There was a nice reconciliation with his dad, and it was just the movie was so well done.
Right. It sounds like there was an awful lot of resolution in the end too. And I hate to say it this way, but we did lose Stanley. I feel like it's almost a really commemorative way to say, we all have the ability to have a great responsibility
Yeah,
and a great power in and of ourselves.
exactly.
All right, that is it for this episode.
We want to remind you that we have a store. It's a T Public store. You can go to publichousemedia.org and find the store. We can also put the actual direct link to our store in the description for the show and on our social channels, so you'll be able to find that as well. I think we have it on some of them already, but we can put it in the specific link with this episode, so it's easy for you guys to find. But we have stuff and merch, and it's great, and you should get some.
We've definitely been doing our very best to update what we have available, and we're going to be posting a few things where we feature what we have and ideas and things that we'd like to also have on our store as well. And if you do have suggestions or ideas, we'd love to hear those as well for our store, for new episodes, and everything that 2019 has to offer as far as movies that we want to watch, that we want to talk about, headcanons, all of that good stuff that BBC Headcanons does on a weekly basis. Thank you so very much for getting nerdy with us today. I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Emily. And thanks for getting nerdy with us on Beauties and Headcanons.